The marriage contract was signed without music, without smiles, and without love. Ink dried on the parchment, while Lady Adelaide Bramwell stood beside her father, feeling less like a bride and more like a solution to a problem no one wished to speak about aloud. Outside the London solicitor's office, carriages rattled across wet streets, unaware that a young woman's entire future had just been exchanged for the price of unpaid debts. At 19, Adelaide owned very little. Her gowns were modest, her dowry non-existent, and her father's fortune had vanished into gambling tables and desperate promises. What remained was her name and her willingness to sacrifice it. The agreement was simple. The Earl of Bramwell's debts would disappear, and in return, Adelaide would marry Richard Hullworth, Duke of Hullworth, just a widower 20 years older than she was, father to 5 children who needed a mother, whether they wanted one or not. Her father called it fortunate. Adelaide called it inevitable. On a gray October morning, her carriage rolled toward Hullworth Castle, carrying her farther from the only life she had ever known. Mist clung to the countryside, and cold wind pressed against the windows as if warning her to turn back. She kept her hands folded tightly in her lap, determined not to cry. Across from her sat Mrs. Whitfield, the Duke's sister, who had traveled to escort her from London. The older woman watched Adelaide with polite curiosity, as though studying a fragile object that might break under pressure. "It is quite impressive," Mrs. Whitfield said, as the castle came into view through the fog. Adelaide followed her gaze and felt her breath catch. Hullworth Castle rose from the Yorkshire hills like something carved from shadow. Dark stone towers stretched into the sky, and rows of tall windows stared down with silent judgment. It looked less like a home and more like a fortress built to keep emotions out. "It is large," Adelaide said carefully. Mrs. Whitfield gave a faint smile. "My brother has always preferred grandeur to comfort." The carriage slowed, wheels crunching over gravel. Servants gathered at the entrance, lined in perfect order, waiting to greet their new duchess. Adelaide's stomach tightened. These strangers would soon look to her for leadership, guidance, authority she did not feel she possessed. The castle doors opened. The man who stepped forward was not what she expected. Richard Hullworth was tall and broad-shouldered, dressed in dark, formal clothing that suited his serious expression. His dark hair showed little gray, despite his 40 years, but his eyes carried a heaviness that spoke of exhaustion deeper than age. They were storm-colored eyes, guarded and distant. He bowed politely. "Lady Adelaide, welcome to Hullworth Castle." His voice was calm, respectful, and completely without warmth. Adelaide lowered herself into a curtsy, praying her shaking legs would hold. "Your Grace, thank you for receiving me." For a moment, their eyes met. Something flickered there, perhaps curiosity, perhaps regret. Then it vanished behind careful formality. "Come," he said, offering his arm. "You must be tired from your journey." Inside, the castle overwhelmed her senses. Marble floors echoed beneath their steps. Portraits of long-dead ancestors watched from gilded frames. Suits of armor stood like silent guards along the walls. Every detail spoke of centuries of power and expectation. "The castle has belonged to my family for over 400 years, the Duke said as they walked. Each generation added something new. "It is magnificent," Adelaide whispered. "It is a responsibility," he corrected gently. They climbed a sweeping staircase that seemed endless before stopping before a pair of carved doors. "These will be your rooms." Adelaide stepped inside and felt suddenly very small. The suite was larger than her entire childhood home. Silk furnishings surrounded a grand fireplace, and tall windows overlooked formal gardens stretching far into the distance. "My late wife decorated these rooms," the Duke said, his tone carefully neutral. You may change anything you wish." The mention of his first wife sent a chill through her. Every object seemed touched by another woman's memory. Adelaide felt like an intruder walking through someone else's life. "The children," she said quickly. "May I meet them?" The Duke hesitated. "They are resistant to change," he admitted. "Their mother's death affected them deeply." "I understand," Adelaide said softly, though she knew she could not truly understand such loss. "We dine at 7, he said. "You will meet them then." After he left, silence filled the room. Adelaide sat slowly in a silk chair, staring at her trembling hands. She was now a duchess, mistress of a castle, wife to a stranger, and stepmother to 5 grieving children. A knock sounded at the door. "Come in," she called. A young woman entered without waiting. She was beautiful and proud, with dark hair and gray eyes identical to the Duke's, though hers burned with open hostility. "So," the girl said, crossing her arms, "you're the replacement." Adelaide rose calmly. "I'm Adelaide. You must be Lady Catherine." "I am," Catherine replied sharply. "I've managed this household since our mother died. I suppose you think you'll take over now." "I think I'm here to help," Adelaide said gently. Catherine laughed without humor. "You're 19, barely older than I am, and you believe you can be a mother to us?" "I don't expect to replace your mother," Adelaide said quietly. No one could. The honesty surprised the girl. Some of the anger faded from her expression. "The others won't be kind," Catherine warned. "Marcus thinks he's responsible for everyone. The twins cause chaos. And Emma," her voice softened. "Emma still cries for Mama every night." Adelaide felt her heart ache. "Tell me about them," she said. Catherine hesitated, then slowly began describing each sibling. As she spoke, Adelaide listened carefully, realizing these children were not difficult. They were hurting. "And you?" Adelaide asked gently. "What do you need?" Catherine blinked, startled. "I need someone who cares about them as much as I do," she admitted quietly. "I promise I will try," Adelaide said. Catherine studied her a long moment before nodding. "Dinner will be interesting." Dinner proved more intimidating than any battlefield. The dining table stretched endlessly, and the 5 children sat like judges deciding her fate. Marcus watched her with guarded suspicion. The twins whispered constantly, while little Emma stared with solemn curiosity. The Duke cleared his throat. "Perhaps you might tell the children about yourself." Adelaide set down her fork. "I love reading," she began. "And gardening. I used to grow vegetables at home." "Can you ride?" Marcus asked suddenly. "Yes," she said, "though not very well." "Why did you marry Papa?" one twin asked bluntly. The question stunned her. "Because sometimes people need each other," she answered carefully. "Did you love him?" the other twin asked. "No," Adelaide said honestly. "We barely knew each other. But I hope we may come to care for each other in time." Emma spoke then, her tiny voice barely heard. "You can't bring Mama back." Adelaide's heart broke. "No, sweetheart, I can't. But maybe I can help make things a little less sad." The dinner ended in uneasy peace. The children guided her through the castle afterward, showing favorite rooms and secret corners. They stopped before a portrait of a beautiful golden-haired woman. "This is Mama," Emma said proudly. Adelaide studied the painting. The late Duchess was breathtakingly lovely. For a moment, insecurity washed over her. "She was very beautiful," Adelaide said softly. "And I see her in all of you." The Duke watched her closely, surprise in his eyes. Later, they entered the nursery, perfectly preserved like a memory, frozen in time. "We don't play here anymore," Emma whispered. "It makes Papa sad." Adelaide felt a quiet anger rise. Children should not live inside grief. "Perhaps," she said gently, "we could change that." Emma's eyes lit with hope. That night, after the children left, Adelaide stood alone with her husband. "They're wonderful children," she said. "They have had to grow up quickly," he replied. "What about love?" she asked softly. "Joy?" "Love," he said coldly, "is a luxury I can no longer afford." He walked away, leaving her alone in the vast hall. Adelaide realized then the true challenge before her. She had not only married a widower, she had entered a house where hope itself had been locked away. The next morning before dawn, unable to sleep, she went to the kitchens to plan a small tea party for Emma. The staff watched her with surprise as she worked beside them, learning Emma's favorite sweets and planning laughter where silence had lived too long. Soon the old nursery filled with sunlight, flowers, and movement again. Emma entered cautiously and whispered, "It feels happy." They prepared together, arranging dolls and tiny cups. For the first time, Emma laughed. Then Marcus burst in, furious. "This is Mama's room. You have no right." Adelaide faced him calmly. "Would your mother want it silent forever?" The boy hesitated. "She loved hearing us laugh," he admitted quietly. "Then perhaps laughter honors her best," Adelaide said. He stayed for the tea party. Soon Catherine arrived. Then the twins. The nursery filled with joy again. And at that exact moment, the Duke appeared in the doorway, his expression dark with anger. "What is the meaning of this?" Adelaide stood, heart pounding but voice steady. "We're having a tea party." "I ordered this room untouched," he said sharply. "And I chose to put a child's happiness first," she replied. Silence fell like thunder. The children fled at his command, leaving Adelaide alone to face him. "How dare you?" he said. "Because someone must," she answered softly. "Your children need joy." Pain flashed across his face. "You know nothing of loss." "No," she said gently. "But I know your wife would not want her children living in sorrow." He turned away, defeated rather than angry. "Clean this up," he said quietly before leaving. Alone in the nursery, surrounded by crumbs and laughter still lingering in the air, what Adelaide realized something had changed. The first crack had appeared in the walls around this family's grief, and she intended to widen it, no matter how long it took. 3 days passed after the nursery incident in an uneasy calm that felt more fragile than peace. The Duke remained polite but distant. Conversations at meals were brief. Servants moved quietly, as though afraid to disturb invisible tensions hanging in the air. Adelaide understood she had crossed a line. Yet when she remembered Emma's laughter echoing through the nursery, she felt no regret. The children behaved differently now. Catherine watched her with thoughtful curiosity instead of suspicion. The twins lingered near her during lessons, asking questions they pretended were accidental. Marcus remained cautious, but his hostility had softened into watchful respect. Only Emma showed her feelings freely, slipping her small hand into Adelaide's whenever she could. It was during breakfast on the 4th morning that change began again. "I've been thinking about the greenhouse," Marcus said suddenly. His words fell into the quiet dining room like a dropped plate. The Duke's fork stopped midair. "What about it?" Catherine asked carefully. "It's been empty for 3 years," Marcus continued. "Lady Adelaide knows about gardens. It seems wasteful." The Duke set down his fork slowly. "The greenhouse remains closed for good reason." "What reason?" Marcus pressed, surprising everyone with his boldness. "Mama loved it. She taught us there, every day." The Duke's jaw tightened. Your mother is gone." The words sounded harsher than he intended. Emma lowered her eyes, and silence spread across the table. It could still be useful," Adelaide said gently. "If restored, it could teach the children science, patience, responsibility." Gray eyes turned toward her sharply. "I believe I made myself clear about consulting me," he said. "I am consulting you," she replied calmly. "I am asking." "The answer is no." Emma's small voice interrupted. "Why can't we see Mama's flowers?" The Duke hesitated, unable to answer. "Because it hurts too much," Catherine said softly. The truth settled heavily between them. Emma frowned in confusion. But wouldn't Mama want her flowers happy? No one spoke. Adelaide saw pain flicker across the Duke's face. For the first time, his certainty wavered. "The plants are dead," he said finally. "Not all," Marcus said quietly. "I've checked." Every head turned toward him. You've been going there?" the Duke asked. Marcus lifted his chin. Someone had to. The admission carried courage and defiance. Adelaide saw pride and grief war inside the Duke's expression. "After breakfast," Adelaide said carefully. "Perhaps Marcus could show me the greenhouse. Only to see it. Nothing more." The Duke hesitated a long moment before nodding once. "You will touch nothing." They crossed the grounds together beneath a pale autumn sun. The greenhouse stood at the far edge of the estate, its glass walls dulled by neglect. Broken panes reflected the sky like cracked mirrors. Marcus unlocked the door. Warm, earthy air greeted them as it opened. Adelaide stepped inside and stopped in awe. Despite abandonment, beauty remained. Roses had grown wild, climbing toward sunlight. Herbs spread across pathways in fragrant chaos. Fruit trees bent under unpruned branches, heavy with life, stubbornly refusing to die. "It's magical," Emma whispered. "Mama called it her Eden," Catherine said. Adelaide walked slowly through the overgrown paths. She could almost imagine the late Duchess moving here, teaching children, laughing among flowers. "She organized everything," Marcus said eagerly. "Medicinal plants here, fruits there. She knew every Latin name." The twins began reciting botanical names proudly, their voices echoing beneath the glass roof. Adelaide smiled. "Your mother was an excellent teacher." "She said plants are like people," Emma added seriously. "They need love." Adelaide knelt beside a struggling rosebush. The roots were strong, the soil still rich. "It could live again," she murmured. Do you really think so?" Catherine asked. "Yes," Adelaide said, "with patience." Marcus's eyes brightened with hope. "Papa would never allow it." "Perhaps," Adelaide said carefully. "He simply needs to see it differently." On the walk back, Adelaide understood something important. The Duke was not cruel. He was afraid. The greenhouse held memories too alive to face, but healing required courage. That evening at dinner, she tried again. "I wanted to thank you for allowing me to see the greenhouse," she said politely. The Duke nodded stiffly. "It is remarkable," she continued. "Your children learned much there." He glanced briefly at Marcus, pride flickering despite himself. "It seems unfortunate for that knowledge to fade," Adelaide added lightly. Perhaps a small kitchen garden could be started elsewhere." It was a compromise, not a challenge. The Duke considered carefully. Finally, he said, "A small garden may be acceptable, under supervision." Emma clapped with delight. The twins cheered. Even Catherine smiled openly. Adelaide lowered her gaze to hide her relief. It was only a beginning, but beginnings mattered. The kitchen garden project began the following week. Groundskeepers prepared soil, while the children worked beside them. sleeves rolled and faces bright with purpose. Adelaide oversaw the planning, guiding without commanding. Slowly, laughter became common again on the estate. One crisp morning, the Duke joined them. He stood watching as Marcus directed planting rows, and Emma carefully pressed seeds into the earth. "They seem invested," he observed. "They missed nurturing something," Adelaide said. He was quiet for a while. "Their mother believed gardening taught patience," he said suddenly. Adelaide felt surprise at the voluntary memory. "She sounds wise." "She was," he replied softly. His gaze followed Emma as she worked. "I've been absent," he admitted. "You've been grieving," Adelaide corrected. "My children learned to live without me. They still need you." He shook his head. "I do not know how to look at them without seeing her." Adelaide spoke gently. "Oh, then look at who they are becoming." At that moment, Emma ran toward them holding an earthworm. "Papa, look!" The Duke stiffened instinctively, ready to withdraw. Adelaide touched his arm lightly. Emma held out the worm proudly. "He helps my flowers." The Duke hesitated, then crouched beside her. "Earthworms make soil healthy," he said. Emma beamed. Adelaide watched father and daughter walk together to return the worm to the garden. It was a small moment, but it felt enormous. The wall around him had cracked again. Weeks passed, and change grew slowly like seedlings. The Duke began staying longer outdoors. He helped Marcus measure garden rows. He listened to Catherine play piano after dinner. He even laughed once at something the twins said, startling everyone into silence before joy replaced surprise. Then one evening, and as the family gathered in the drawing room, he spoke quietly. "I have been thinking about the greenhouse." Every conversation stopped. "I believed preserving it untouched honored my wife," he continued. "I realize now that allowing her work to decay does the opposite." Hope filled the room. "I would like to restore it," he said. Emma gasped. Catherine covered her mouth. Marcus stood frozen. "Not as a shrine," the Duke added. "As a living place, for all of you." The children rushed toward him, embracing him at once. Years of distance dissolved in seconds. Adelaide watched from across the room, tears blurring her vision. He looked at her over their heads. "Thank you," he said quietly. She nodded, unable to speak. The greenhouse restoration began immediately, and workers repaired glass panels, while the family cleared overgrowth together. Days filled with shared effort replaced years of silence. Adelaide found herself laughing often, her hands stained with soil, her heart lighter than she had ever known. One evening, long after the children slept, she walked through the half-restored greenhouse with the Duke beside her. Lantern light glowed against new glass panes. Cool air carried the scent of earth and possibility. "You are remarkable," he said suddenly. She flushed. "I am only helping." "You saved us," he said simply. She looked away, unsettled by the intensity in his voice. Their marriage had changed quietly. They spoke easily now. Shared decisions, shared smiles. Yet something deeper lingered unspoken between them. "I never expected this," he admitted. Neither did I." He stepped closer. "I thought love was finished for me," he said softly. "But you have made me hope again." Her breath caught. "Richard," she whispered, using his name for the first time. His hand rose gently to her cheek. "The feeling growing between us," he said, voice low. "Do you feel it too?" Her answer came before fear could stop it. "Yes." He kissed her then, softly at first, then with months of restrained emotion. The world seemed to pause around them, leaving only warmth and certainty. When they parted, He rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said. Tears filled her eyes. "I love you too." In that moment, beneath the glass roof where grief had once ruled, something new fully bloomed. Not duty, not arrangement. Love. And as spring approached Hullworth Castle, the family that had once lived in silence began to prepare for a future none of them had believed possible. The greenhouse was no longer a memory of loss. It was becoming a promise of life. Spring arrived early that year, as if the land itself had decided Hullworth Castle deserved a second beginning. Snow melted from the hills, flowers pushed through softened soil, and sunlight filled rooms that had once felt heavy with silence. The greenhouse became the heart of it all. Where grief had once lived untouched, laughter now echoed beneath shining glass panels. Workers came and went, but it was the family who truly restored the space. Catherine planned flower beds with careful elegance. Marcus studied irrigation systems with serious dedication. The twins competed to see whose plants would grow fastest. Emma followed everyone with endless questions and dirt on her cheeks, and Adelaide stood at the center, guiding gently, never commanding, watching a broken family grow whole again. The Duke changed most of all. Richard no longer disappeared into his study for days. He walked the gardens each morning, often with Emma's small hand wrapped in his. He discussed estate matters openly with Marcus and praised Catherine's judgment during household decisions. Even the servants moved more freely, sensing warmth returning to their master. One evening, as sunset painted the greenhouse gold, Adelaide stood arranging newly planted roses when Richard approached quietly behind her. "You have transformed this place," he said. She smiled without turning. "It transformed itself. We only helped." He stepped beside her, studying the blooming flowers. "Ah, that is what you always say. Yet none of this would exist without you." Adelaide felt warmth rise in her cheeks. Months had passed since their first confession of love, yet his words still unsettled her heart in the most wonderful way. "I only wanted the children to smile again," she said softly. "And instead," he replied, "you gave us a life we thought was gone forever." They walked slowly through the greenhouse paths together. Lanterns glowed overhead, reflecting in the glass like small stars. "I was afraid to love you," he admitted suddenly. She looked at him. "I know. I thought loving again meant forgetting my past," he continued. "But you taught me something different. Love does not replace. It grows." Adelaide slipped her hand into his. "Your past made you who you are, and I love all of you, even the parts shaped by sorrow." He stopped walking, pulling her gently closer. "You are my future," he said. The words settled deep within her heart, steady and certain. Months later, Hullworth Castle prepared for a celebration unlike any it had hosted in years. Invitations spread across Yorkshire, announcing the official reopening of the greenhouse. Society buzzed with curiosity. Many still remembered whispers surrounding the Duke's unusual second marriage. A young girl married to a grieving widower with 5 children had promised scandal. Instead, rumors spoke of miracles. On the morning of the reopening, sunlight poured through newly polished glass, illuminating thousands of flowers in full bloom. Roses climbed trellises. Herbs filled the air with fragrance. Fruit trees blossomed in soft white clouds. The guests arrived in elegant carriages, astonished by what they saw. But Adelaide barely noticed the admiration of society. Her attention remained fixed on her family. Catherine, now confident and radiant, welcomed visitors with grace beyond her years. Marcus proudly explained agricultural improvements to impressed estate owners. The twins demonstrated their botanical knowledge with dramatic enthusiasm. Emma skipped through the paths carrying flowers almost too large for her small arms, and Richard stood beside Adelaide, pride clear in his eyes whenever he looked at her. "Mama Adelaide," Emma called, running toward her. Adelaide knelt as the little girl offered a bouquet. "For the house," Emma said proudly. "They're beautiful," Adelaide replied, kissing her forehead. Emma leaned close and whispered, "I told everyone you make everything happy." Tears threatened again, as they often did these days. Later, as guests wandered the gardens, Lady Penworth, a well-known society hostess, approached Adelaide with a curious smile. "When news of your marriage first reached London," she said, "many expected disaster. A young bride, grieving children, a distant duke. No one believed happiness could come from such an arrangement." Adelaide laughed softly. "Neither did I. And yet," the woman continued, glancing around the joyful greenhouse, "you have accomplished something extraordinary." Adelaide followed her gaze to where Richard lifted Emma into his arms, while the twins argued cheerfully nearby. "It was never only me," she said. "We healed together." That evening, after the guests departed and quiet returned, the family gathered for dinner inside the greenhouse. It had become their tradition, eating among growing things as a reminder of how far they had come. Conversation flowed easily. Laughter came often. Adelaide rested a hand gently over her stomach, feeling the small movement that still filled her with wonder. Their child would arrive in autumn, another new beginning for a family once frozen in grief. Richard noticed the gesture and smiled warmly. "Tired?" he asked softly. "Happy," she replied. After dinner, the children drifted off to bed one by one, each stopping to hug her goodnight. Catherine lingered longest. "I used to think no one could ever replace Mama," she said quietly. "Now I realize you didn't replace her. You helped us find ourselves again." Adelaide embraced her tightly. "Your mother would be proud of you." Catherine smiled through tears. "She would be proud of you too." Later, Adelaide and Richard walked alone through the moonlit greenhouse. Night air cooled the glass walls, while flowers released soft perfume around them. "Do you ever regret it?" Adelaide asked suddenly. "Marrying someone so young, taking such a risk." Richard stopped and turned toward her. "The only regret I have," he said gently, "is that I almost let fear steal the life waiting for me. You arrived when I had stopped believing in joy. You reminded me that love is not weakness. It is courage." She leaned into him, feeling safe in a way she had never known before. "I came here with nothing," she whispered. "You came here with everything that mattered," he corrected. "Kindness, patience, hope." They walked slowly toward the castle lights glowing in the distance. A year earlier, Adelaide had arrived frightened and uncertain, believing herself a sacrifice made for survival. Now she understood she had not been sent to Hullworth Castle as payment for debts. She had been sent as a second chance, for 5 children who needed laughter, for a man who needed healing, and for herself, a young woman who discovered strength she never knew she possessed. England would later call their story astonishing. Newspapers described the young duchess who transformed a grieving household and captured a duke's heart. That society admired the romance, the restored estate, the blooming gardens. But Adelaide knew the truth was simpler. Love had grown slowly, like seeds planted in winter soil, with patience, with care, with courage. As Richard took her hand and led her home beneath the starlit sky, Adelaide felt certain of one thing. At 19, she had been given to a widowed duke with 5 children, and what followed had not been scandal or sorrow. It had been a family reborn, a love unexpected, and a future blooming brighter than anyone had ever imagined.